So the foundations, and we've already talked about this earlier in the module, but the foundations of when we're talking about health inequities, these are systematic differences in the health status of different population groups. And so what we mean by systematic is that these big microstructures of our lives, so things that go beyond just the individual health, things that are the bigger cultural, social, economic, political, governmental, those sort of things that have an impact on health and the health of groups, particularly in terms of like statistics. So part and parcel with health inequalities and inequities is this concept of hegemony, which is this unjust power, right? So racism, sexism, etc., all those immoral systems and structures prevalent in societies across the globe. So we're looking at the ways that race, social economic status, location, where you live, gender and sexuality, how those all play a role in systematic advantage and disadvantage for all of us, but particularly for certain groups of people, as you learned last class. So I want to start here with COVID-19 because we are currently living in a pandemic and things aren't really shut down right now where I am in Arizona, but it is still changing things. And so something that was brought attention a lot, especially a couple years ago, was how COVID-19 infects, hospitalizes, and kills U.S. Americans differently based on their race and ethnicity. And so this statistic is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, updated last month now. So, and as you can see, Native Americans are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized and 2 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than compared to white folks. And the breakdown continues. Asian Americans are less likely to be infected than white folks, whereas Black and Hispanic or Latino folks are more likely. And there's a little kind of note right below the statistics from the CDC, and they're talking about how ethnicity are risk markers for underlying conditions. These are the systematic things that we're being attuned to here in health inequities, social economic status, access to healthcare, exposure to the virus because of your job, your work. And they also have a note that it's important to calculate age because we know that older folks are more likely to be hospitalized and die from COVID-19, as well as folks who are immunocompromised. So all that in consideration with race and ethnicity can really help play an insight. So this is right, because usually when I teach this, students are like, but Ben, how could a virus be racist? And we have to say, well, it's not that. It's that the underlying conditions, the social, cultural conditions that have been here for generations are now being exposed through COVID-19. And Native Americans are the highest rate because they typically live impoverished because of the colonialism. The United States invaded and colonized through violent genocide indigenous lands and waters, and haven't made any steps in repairing that, hardly at all. So it's no surprise then that they are suffering in terms of their other health. And we'll be moving through this throughout this lecture. And I do want to pause here, and I do want to say, first of all, this information in this lecture is heavy. and really sad. It's dejecting. So I want you all to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves, especially if you find that you belong to this, to one of these groups that are disproportionately affected. Take care of, pay attention to how it feels in your body and in your mind, and take care of yourselves here, and take care of each other, please. Let's go back. I also do want to give you your first question for the discussion board. There will be 2 questions in this lecture, and the first I want you to answer is, how has culture, broadly defined, think about ethnicity, family, religion, etc., place, age, how has your culture, broadly defined, influenced your experience and perception of COVID-19? How has culture, broadly defined, influenced your experience and perception of COVID-19? And take a few sentences to describe that. Moving forward, going back to the systemic injustice, we have what is called the racial wealth gap in this country. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, you can see here on the left side that Black Americans earn considerably less than white Americans and Asian Americans. And this is due to, really can be traced back to the slavery era, where Black Americans were property that were owned by mostly white folks. And they generated wealth that throughout the generations through an economic principle called compounding interest that says the longer you have money, the more you invest it, the more money you earn on interest. And so we've seen that for white Americans in particular, that has built a wealth that Black Americans have not been privileged to because of slavery.
For my first pause and reflect, I want to stop here at the racial wealth gap and the health insurance gap, and like you said, how it dates back all the way to slavery. I just feel like that really baffles me, because all this thing that happened so many years ago, and all these years that we tried to, well, not tried, but we did try to abolish slavery, and as soon as we did, and now several years later, all these people are still getting affected by this. They're making less money than everybody else, and not even just them, but the Hispanics and the Asians, they are less insured than the regular person. And even if, and being uninsured with the amount of money that they make, I feel like that explains a little bit about why there was so much death with the colored people and different races during COVID, because they couldn't afford to go to the hospital or to get these medications that they need, is because they didn't have enough money to do it, because they're making significantly less than all these other people.
Discriminatory laws and such like that. And so this is what's called the racial wealth gap. This has influence on health in a lot of ways, but one of the most, poignant relationships is with access to health insurance in the United States. And people of color continue to be the most uninsured groups in this country, with Hispanic, broadly defined, being the most likely to be uninsured. And white U.S. Americans are the most likely to be insured. So when you don't have health insurance, you don't have access to health care, and that can obviously play a huge role in in affecting your health, particularly with preventative care and not getting that care that you may need. Okay, moving into some specific health disparities and inequities. We're looking at cancer in Black women compared to white women. And despite them having similar incidence rates, so Black women are just as likely to get cancer as white women, except in some cases where they're actually less likely to get cancer, they're still dying from cancer more. This is particularly true of breast cancer and uterine cancer. And this, Black men compared to white men, they're 2 times more likely to die from prostate cancer, and they're just less likely to receive information about cancer screening and the importance of catching cancer before it's really too late. So excuse the typo. That second to last sentence should be, they are less likely to receive information. And in another form of health issues in terms of like mortality rate, we know that Black men in this country are 3 times more likely to be killed in police than white folks. And that changes drastically depending on the area. But 3 times the rate is kind of the national average when you balance it all out. Some health disparities among Latino, Latinx folks is 20% or 25% have high blood pressure. So 1 in 4 of all Latinos have high blood pressure. Latino women are 40% more likely to have cancer, the cervix, cervical cancer. That's compared to white women, and they are 20% more likely to die from that cancer. Suicide rates among Latina teens is 40 times higher than white teenage girls. So we can see that there's a wide range of health disparities here, ranging from blood pressure to cancer to taking your own life. Here's some health disparities among Asian Americans. They're 35 times more likely to contract tuberculosis than and these are all compared with white Americans. 2 times more likely to develop chronic hepatitis B, and 8 times more likely to die from it. 6.3 of Asian American adults have received mental health services. That's compared to almost 3 times less than white Americans. White Americans, around 18%, have received mental health services. And a big part of this is cultural stigma, where in many Asian cultures, particularly in Southeast Asia, a cultural value is to not talk about emotions and things like that. So it really stigmatizes mental health concern. Some health disparities among Native American and Indigenous American folks is access to water. 1 out of 10 Native Americans don't have access to tap water. And so this really dovetails with the COVID-19 finding when, a big way to prevent COVID-19 is to wash your hands frequently. Wash your hands once an hour or something, and Native Americans who don't have access to water say, you want us to do what? It's not going to happen. We don't have that privilege to have that much access to water. And so that's just one example of how it affects health. Native American women, girls, and Two-Spirit folks, so non-binary, transgender, or otherwise queer, are 10 times more likely to be murdered and 2 times more likely to be raped compared to white women in this country. And suicide is the second leading cause of death. So we have a lot of form of violences and health inequities across the board here for our Indigenous kith and kin. Now, place and social economics really does play a role. And so among white folks who are poor and live in rural areas, they're 2 times more likely to die from COVID than non-rural white residents. They're also more likely to have what's called indentulism. So when both partial and full indentulism, when they're missing teeth. and they are less likely to have access to consistent mental health services compared to those living in non-rural areas. So again, we can see here how this is really playing a role. I want to bring up intergenerational effects, which is this phenomenon that as children we kind of see what our parents do, and our parents treat us really similar to how their parents treated us, and their parents treated us based on how their parents treated them as children. And it's just generational effects over and over again. Sometimes we can break free from it, but it's really hard to do. But we can do it. It's just difficult. So there's these things like generational trauma that particularly Black and Native Americans experience due to the history that, and we know that this is genetic, that the trauma can literally change our DNA. And so this is not just something to be written off, that there is literal changes to the body itself because of trauma. There's something called John Henryism, named after the myth of this Black laborer who was said to be the best, hardest worker of the railroads, and he beat the world records and then shortly died right after. Well, John Henryism is this phenomenon among Black men in particular, but also folks of other races, including white Americans, to work harder when they are given a challenge, and which is fine, right? It's important that we don't give up and that we work hard, but what happens is when you work too hard and you don't take care of your health, your body will force you. If you don't take breaks, your body will force you. It will break down. And so we see that John Henryism is this defining that if you're working too hard, too much, not taking time to heal, your body will actually break down. It will actually be worse for you in the long run. And resilience is connected to that. It's this ability to adapt and overcome to challenges and barriers. So we need this at
my second pause and reflect, I'm going to stop here at the intergenerational effects. I want to talk about like the trauma and resilience in regards to Crazy Brave. It's the book I'm reading for a class right now. I've been doing my book reviews for it, but it was just like resonated with me because reading how she went through all this trauma, like all these different things she had to go through, but she still persevered. She was resilient. She was brave, just like Crazy Brave. She became this amazing poet. She had kids, and now she has a whole memoir about her life and how she became to be this amazing person despite all the setbacks, despite all these things that she had to go through. She made this beautiful life for herself, and I just think that that's really amazing.
The individual level, of course we do. When things get tough, we need to be strong. We need to have community, but we also need structural changes. Just having resilience is not going to fix the large majority, if not all, of these systemic issues that we've talked about in this lecture. It's important, but it needs to be in tandem with structural changes. Praxis and orientation. So praxis is just when you learn new information, what are you going to do about it? We need to actually apply things, apply knowledge, because if we don't do that, then education is a bust. There's no point to education if it's not going to change how we live our lives. So the second thing I want you to do for your discussion board, this is part 2. I gave you part 1 earlier. Here's part 2, is I want you to focus on a health disparity or health inequity that we either discuss in this lecture or that you find on your own through your own research online, through verifiable sources. You need to make sure it's academic, scholastic, or trustworthy, credible sources. So choose a health inequity. Talk about it. So describe the issue, and then tell us what are steps that you and I and that we in the class can actually take towards helping folks. What can we do to remedy the situation? What's some actions that we can take to help heal? And there's the sources quite a bit this week, and I'm looking forward to hearing or to reading your discussion boards.
So now I have my module reading summary of the Indian woman farmers, and I just think this article highlights the critical yet under recognized role of women in Indian agriculture. Despite making up nearly half of the agricultural workforce, women farmers face systematic challenges such as lack of land ownership, limited access to credit, and exclusion from decision-making processes. The authors argue that policy frameworks often ignore gendered experiences, reinforcing inequalities in rural livelihoods. As stated in the text, the invisibilization of women's labor in agriculture perpetrates a cycle of disenfranchisement. You can find this on page 4. I just think that they call for more inclusive agricultural policies that acknowledge and support women as key contributors to food security. And for my personal takeaway, I don't know if it's supposed to be from the reading or the video, the module lecture, but I just chose to do that. I think it was around 12:15 or 12:20 when you talked about the Native American disadvantages for their health. And I just think that it's really insane that only 1 out of 10 Native Americans will have access to safe tap water, and that suicide is the second leading cause of death among them. That really itches my brain in a different kind of way, and kind of just like what you said in the last part of the lecture, like what can we do to help these people? I just feel like we can somehow as a whole be able to offer them better mental health services, someone to talk to, so they aren't gonna go and take their own lives that way. We can get volunteers, we can help donate water so they can have access to this safe tap water. I feel like there's many different routes we can go. Those are just a few that have been my brain right now. But yeah, thank you.